CNC fella's fault. They're already blaming me for being late here.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
They'll blame you for everything. So, Eloy, now that you've got that cream for a week, is that rash clearing up?
Oh yeah, dude. Yeah, I've been scraping it off the armpit, and everything's been working good.
Oh, glad to hear it, man. That's nothing's worse than that.
I got one of them ball roller deodorants the other day. Turns out it's for under your arms.
No, I can't believe it. You have those Twizzlers you bought at the store, Doc?
You know it.
We're
live now. Silent snacks. Hashtag silent snacks.
So, Dave, I'd like to welcome you to the show, dude.
Thank you very much, Eloy. I have to say I was a little bit apprehensive about coming on your show, but then Javi told me that you pay your guests $100. So I thought, well, yeah, I could use an extra $100. And I know the check hadn't got here yet, but I'm sure it'll be here any day.
We'd like to thank this week's guest host sponsor, Javier Unzueta, Javi's Woodshop. Good job, Javi. Thank you for doing that. Usually it's the first person to mention it to the guests that we make pay. So, Javi, that's great. Good on you, buddy.
Did he tell you that it's Madagascar shekels?
No,
it's Prussian francs.
He pays people in bamboo.
Yeah. He'll roll up a big bunch of bamboo and send it on over to you. So, dude, yeah, I appreciate you coming on, and so you were apprehensive, huh?
No, I'm just kidding.
But it was a tough.
I'm honored to be on your show. I even felt so good. I went through my laundry basket and pulled out my cleanest dirty shirts. So,
it's funny, dude. No, because so the whole thing is, it's funny because when I started doing the artwork for it, and for those folks that follow on the Facebooks and have the activity there and on Instagram, so I like to make the Mad Maker sort of, every guest gets like some sort of crazy, and on yours, and they can go and check it out. They can check it out on your Facebook and on your Instagram, on mine, and so added laser beams and stuff, and made it psychedelically trippy, science fiction, this and that. And I was simultaneously, when working on that, I sent off the artwork to other CNCers prominently known in the community and stuff. Just, like, hey, check it out, man, how cool. And they got back to me and they were like, well, you're going to have to double check it. Dude, all of a sudden I felt like some pressure, like some community wall of like, hey, don't mess with Dave. What's that all about, dude?
Well, I don't know. I have a pretty loyal following, and I guess they got my back.
It was insane, dude. But yeah, so I'm happy that you're here. So the idea of the show, just for those folks that come after the fact, and we've interviewed a lot of people, and what we try to do is get a little bit of the backstory of people alongside the making, the create, just the things that make them tick and their thoughts on things. So the idea is to interview people that create things, that are involved with making things, putting things out there in the world. And we call them makers as a general rule. And it branches out from all sorts of disciplines, CNC, woodworking, just art in general, just everything, right? We're interested in getting to, sort of gleam at that inspiration that these folks have and their points of views, because it can sort of shine a light on us thinking, oh, well, that's what they think. Oh, yeah, that makes sense. Or, nah, that doesn't make sense. And it's a good thing, right? So that's the whole purpose of the show. So before we find out who's out there and all that, I do want to ask you to start off where you're from, a little bit of a background, if you could.
Okay. I originally, a lot of folks may not know this. Some of them, some folks might, but I'm originally not from Georgia. I'm originally from a little town called Danville, Indiana. Born and raised up there and lived up there until about December of '81. So technically I've been in Georgia much longer than I lived in Indiana. So I'm kind of a Yankee transplant, I guess.
Wow. Did you have brothers, sisters? How's that?
I had two sisters. And actually, it's weird because we all kind of ended up in Georgia for one reason or another. My parents, I had one sister marry a fella from down here, and then my parents started coming down here for vacation and to visit grandkids and stuff. So they moved here when they retired, and then I came down, and then my other sister came down shortly after that. So we all kind of ended up down here. Not many of us left now, though.
Yeah, through the transcourse of time, we know how this is. As we get older, you know, life is a thing that is always developing. I get. So, was it a rural? Was it a suburban? Was it a what type of
well, the little town is funny because the little town that I grew up in back when we were all in high school and stuff, we used to jokingly call it Mayberry because, you know, we only had a couple of stoplights and stuff like that, you know, one or two cops and that kind of thing. And now the town itself still hasn't grown. They've got some things like Walmart, McDonald's that finally got there. And what's funny is they actually have on the corner of the square across from the courthouse, they have a restaurant that's been there for several years now called the Mayberry Cafe. And every year, I don't remember what month they do it in, but they have like a Mayberry festival. There's the guy that owns the cafe. I think that's who's it is. He has an old 62 Ford Galaxy painted up like the old car on the Andy Griffith Show. And they have a big festival. They have somebody that does the Barney Fife, dresses up like him and does the imitation and stuff. So it's pretty good. I haven't been back to see that. I'd like to go back to see that sometime.
Now, growing up, boy, I can hear my echo. Can you hear it? Where's it coming from? It's gone now. So growing up, what were the things that sort of stoked your interest, you know, as a kid and stuff? What were the interest points?
Well, my parents, when I was, I guess I was about 4, they bought some property that was basically a corner of a cornfield, and cleared it off and built a house. And we lived out in the country, surrounded by farms, and of course, with me having 2 sisters, and they were both older, there wasn't really anybody for me to play with as a kid. So I had to use my own imagination, and my dad, you know, I can only imagine what he must have thought back then, but I used to go out there and like take, he had like a knife. In fact, I still have the workbench that he had way back then. But I used to go back there and just take a hammer and nails and, just totally screw up the top of his workbench, take a saw and cut into it and stuff. And now, like I said, it's out there in my garage now. When I look at it, I'm thinking, now, I wonder why Dad never said anything. He never got on me for doing that. But yeah, I just had a good imagination and always liked tinkering with stuff. And if something tore up, I had to figure out how to fix it.
All right, so we're gonna go ahead and ask you guys here, co-hosts, to tell us who's out there and introduce yourselves and that whole bit. But before we exit Dave here for a second, when we come back, we're gonna ask Dave if, and this is always an if, we don't know, it could be, when he was growing up, to give us one of those sort of, I got in trouble because I did this and this and that. A moment that was like cringeworthy, a moment that was like, oh, as a kid I shouldn't have done. I got so busted, and so on. So we'll leave that, and it could be that something happened. It could be that nothing happened. It would be disappointing if there was no event as a kid that he wasn't devious and did something and got busted for. But sometimes that's the case. I don't know. We'll find out. But we're gonna send it off to Jamie and Dog. We'll start with Jamie to do his introductions, and then Doc, and then you guys take care of business back and forth so we can have a good interaction.
Well, hello again, everybody. Again, I apologize for being away again. But as you can see, I'm back. I'm here drinking out of my Minecrafting mug. My YouTube is JP Woodwork. My Twitter and Instagram is JP_Woodwork, but don't bother with Twitter because I'm never really on there. I'm 1/4 of the Makers International podcast, as we've just hired Mr. Steve Twidell as a permanent member of the podcast now. So that website is makersinternationalpodcast.com. My personal website is jp-woodwork.com. Both websites are sponsored by Steve Harneal. I think that's his name now, isn't it, Eloy?
That is Steve Harneal for sure.
Steve Harneal over at Harneal Media. So his website is harnealmedia.com. I think that's it for the time being, apart from I haven't done it for a while. Eloy. Eloy.
Yeah.
No, it's not Eloy. I stepped back. Okay.
We're seeing if you have a knife check.
Oh, I'm working the knife.
Oh, all right. I'm gonna take over since Eloy's dropping the ball.
Here. There you go.
What the hell is that? I didn't say a nail file.
Yeah, but you're not supposed to do. What you're supposed to do is say, if you don't have a knife, or if you don't have a whatever, you're not a woodworker, right? Which, incidentally, we're gonna have to ask Dave, because look.
All right, I've got some scissors. Of course, I'm in my office. I've got some scissors and a really dull letter opener. Will that work?
That counts.
That counts. That's sharp.
We're gonna have to ask Dave. And there's a huge issue with CNC and woodworking in general. There's a few issues going on. One is the issue of CNCers never, ever have beards by law. There's an unwritten sort of parchment somewhere locked away in some sort of
with a parchment
with, like, you know, torches that never die out and stuff. That CNCers are always, you know, they may have, like Lindsay, a mustache, or they can have a seasonal, like Javi will grow out for some reason from one day to the next. He'll have a clean shaven face, and like the next day he'll have a branded, completely dark beard that's etched into it. I don't know how that happens.
I think that has something to do with the phases of the moon.
Yeah.
It's when it's a certain phase of the moon when he's but so close. I think that might be it.
Javi has to have a shave every other hour, otherwise he's not a CNCer anymore if he gets out to do it.
Well, all in good humor. There's this thing. I don't know if have you heard of that, Dave? Well,
I have, but you know, I've grown a beard or two here the past few months. But what's funny is I'm so gray that I have to have it out about 2 weeks before anybody even notices. Because when you see me on these, you know, if you're not seeing me in person, you don't even notice because it's all white and kind of blends in. You don't see it.
But notice it's seasonal, though, with CNCers. They always like to maintain a sort of like clean, like, you know, and then you have the scruffy like beard chunks sticking out with like, but so there's something going on. I don't know how deep.
Well, you know, there's exceptions to every rule, though, because I mean, take Carl Jacobson.
That's true.
See, you know, there's always exceptions to the rule.
Yeah, but when you have a head of hair like Carl's, all rules are off.
Yeah,
that's good.
When you're Silver Fox like that, it doesn't matter. Beard, no beard. He just rocks the short, little short, cool guy sideburns. If you ever noticed on CJ.
However, if you go back to quite a few of his old videos, he did have a rather big goatee.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we'll figure this whole thing out. We have to dispel this whole thing, but we'll figure that out. Let's see, Doc, and then you guys tell us who's out there, and then we'll return to see what Dave has to offer as far as a mischievous, wicked occurrence that he got busted for, if at all. We'll find out.
Yeah. Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's Doc. Check me out on Instagram at Jared HIldabrant. Past that, this is really the only place I materialize once a week on the internet to see my face. Scratch Podcast, check that out. Those are my plugs. JP, would you like to go through and do the romper room bit and read the chat, or would you like me to do it, sir?
Yeah, I can do it, mate, if you want. No worries.
Age before beauty?
Yeah, absolutely.
There you go, bud.
Right, so out in the chat we have Graphics 11. He's got a beard and 3 CNCs here. So that's put Eloy's theory out of whack.
There's exceptions to the rule, dude.
Billy Burt's out of there. Awesome Wood Things. Havy's Wood Shop. Bobley's Wood Shop. Harnell Media. Katie Dotson. Matt Huss. All that's Awesome Wood Things. Daniel Harju. You're out there, Eloy. Ashley from Chip Builds. Steve Nealon at Harnell Media. Sophie from Make It Soph. Dylan's Woodworks. The Patricks is out there. Doc's out there. Jim Bashir's. Ryan Bitter from Waylight Creations. Let's have a look. Katie Dotson, she can have another mention. Let's keep going up. DJ from Socomo Woodwork. Moshwitz is out there. Let's keep going up a little bit longer. For seems like that's it for the time being. Yep.
I would like to just interject for a second.
Yeah.
I have a beard, and I think both sides of the argument are crazy. So I am neither. I may have the official markings of the woodworker, but that's not the case. I just
because you like metal work.
Yeah, and yeah, I'm more of like a maker mechanic kind of guy, but I consider myself to be like woodworking Switzerland. I don't care what you're doing with it.
Fair enough. We won't, you know.
I just want to go on record with that.
All right.
Also, I just want to say I've got a beard, and I wouldn't turn it away if Dave was to give it to us.
All right. So Dave, was there a time that, I mean, I had multiple scenarios where I got in trouble for things that I did. So as a kid, anything?
Yeah, you know, if you'd gave me a heads up on this question, I probably could have thought of several things. But since you didn't, the only one that comes to mind right now, and of course this is many years ago, but when I was in high school, I used to have some pretty crazy parties at my parents' house when they would go out of town on vacation and stuff. And usually it was all cool, except for I remember one particular time when I thought they weren't going to be home till, you know, whatever day. And I guess they weren't having that great a time. They decided to come home early, and they come pulling in the driveway, and there's cars all in the driveway.
Oh, man.
Yeah, it wasn't a good day for old Dave that time.
Yeah, it sounds like a John Hughes film.
Yeah, what was the reaction? Like, I mean, just take us through it. Remember, we're trying to sort of like take a snapshot of you recalling these things. So what was that scenario? Where was it like, Dave, just usher them out? Or was it like, what are you doing? What happened?
Well, they were really pretty calm until everybody left. But of course, you know, most of the time when you see somebody's parents pull in the driveway, everybody knows it's party over. So they all kind of loaded up and took off. And yeah, that was a long night for me.
Good stuff. Okay, so before we leave Indiana and you're growing up, can you give us a few things that you were as a kid, you know, young teen, growing up, things that you were, what was in your, you know, to the best of your recollection, the music that those tunes that you frequented, things that you were interested, just give us a little bit of that so that we have it on record.
Well, as far as music, I can remember when, I remember back when everything you listened to was on AM radio. And then in Indianapolis, they had a station. I don't even know if they still have it now. It's called WNAP. And then everybody would call it Naptown. But they were the first really nice FM station that I remember. And I mean, I just listened to all the stuff that was, good for the day, that time of the day, like I'm a big Leonard Skinner fan. Love Leonard Skinner, Pink Floyd, Allman Brothers. I mean, I have a very diverse taste in music. I mean, there's a lot of country I like, mostly the older country, not the stuff they call country today. Rock, Southern rock. Like for example, one band that I really like, and they're from Georgia, is Blackberry Smoke, which reminds me kind of the way Leonard Skinner used to be. They have a lot of the same kind of sounds and stuff, so I like that. But I mean, really, I mean, you name it, the Beatles, the Who, all those old favorites, That's
heck yeah. I still listen to all that better than whatever's out now, frankly. As a music connoisseur, that's actually, I can't stand anything past, for me, the 80s, right? I look fondly on the 80s because I was coming up in the 80s and all that stuff that now I look fondly, but for sure the 60s music, and just the good old rock and roll from the 50s to me, because I play guitar and stuff, and it's just, if you're studying music on any, deeper, you want to go back to that stuff as opposed to what's happening now, frankly, So one last question about that. When you would do your, school, in a sense, school was out, would you bus home? Would you walk home? Would you be driven home? And when you got home, were there any shows on TV that little guilty pleasures before doing homework? How was that as well? Hit us with whatever you got.
Well, of course, remember, I'm a good bit older than you. So I rode a school bus, very different than the way they ride school buses.
Did you spaceship? Did you teleport home in the metallic suits?
No, I rode, it was funny because back, and again, I'm telling my age here, but back when I went to school and you rode a school bus, you damn sure behaved while you were on that school bus, because the people that drove the school buses back then were usually farmers that, big burly farmers that, and they all knew everybody. They knew your mom and dad and everything. So, you didn't have any of the trouble on school buses. And of course, there's no cell phones and stuff back then too. But, yeah, everybody behaved, and it was a different time. But yeah, I had to ride a school bus. I remember I'd get off the bus to school. We always had a dog. The dog would always be laying out at the end of the driveway waiting for me to get home from school. And then I'd go in and I kind of laughed when you mentioned TV, because I think back then we had like 3 channels to watch. So, but back then you watch, on Sunday nights you watch Bonanza or, The Rifleman or whatever. I don't even remember what days they were on, but, yeah, all those old, the Andy Griffith Show back in the day.
Well, it's funny because, as you know, a lot of those reruns throughout the decades as they go are repeated for kids coming up and alongside new shows. And the reason that I bring this up on the show is because all these cultural influences are influences, and they kind of do glue, this whole timeline that we exist in. And to some people, it holds some importance and stuff, and it's a point of reference for everyone. So all those shows we got to see as kids in the 80s, for instance, growing up as well. But I guess it would be different, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Just important things. So, eventually you move away from Indiana, and you end up where?
Well, I've been here in Georgia for the last however long that is. Since December of '81 is when I moved down here, and been down here ever since. I first lived in Conyers. I've really, the different places I've lived here in Georgia is all within a really small area. I lived in the Oxford area for a while. Lived in Conyers for a little bit. And then I've been down here in McDonough, which is just southeast of Atlanta, about 30 minutes from the airport, I guess. I've lived down here going on 12 years.
Okay. And so, can you begin to tell us the story of how, and you've probably told it before, but I think it's key, because what began your journey into woodworking, making, because you didn't start with CNC, or did you?
Well, yeah, I mean, for me, I'd always worked at sheet metal job shops. That's what I'd done my career for, the last 25 years or so. And, so I knew about CNC. I mean, that's what I did. I drew in CAD and laid out parts and programmed lasers and turret presses and different things like that.
You moved from Indiana to Georgia, and then you began this journey with, or did you already have those skills?
No, I actually started learning those skills as I got down here.
Okay.
I got a job at a sheet metal shop and learned how to draw first 2D and then later on 3D. So I'd always been around, CNC type of machinery, stuff like that. And I was sitting around work one day. I sat at a desk, boring desk job. And I was sitting around one day thinking there were some things that I would like to make just kind of as a side thing, not to get rich or anything, just to do something, in my time off work. And I thought of a few products that I wanted to make. And then I thought, well, since I already know how to program CNC stuff, it sure would be nice to have one to be able to make, those things. And then I could think of other things to make. And so I started looking around at CNCs, and, back then we're talking like 2004 or 5, I guess. There were a few hobby CNCs, but the ones you could find were like $3 or $4 grand or something like that. And I just wasn't going to spend that kind of money. I really didn't have that kind of money for something like that. But that's when I thought, well, maybe since I'm a sheet metal guy, maybe I could design my own and just make my own machine. And so that's what I started doing. I started, trying to figure out the parts and what I would need and all that. And I built, this is way back, if you've ever heard anybody call one of my machines the Sidewinder. That's what my brand used to be several years ago. I made stuff under a Sidewinder CNC brand. And I made a few of these, and, I'd make one and sell it, and then I'd build another one and sell it. And then finally, I was at work one day, and I was looking at they had a big 4,000 watt laser, and I was standing out there looking at that machine, and suddenly I kind of had the light bulb come on, and I'm like, that's the way I need to design my machine, only smaller. So I came home and I, modeled up a machine, and I'm thinking, I think that would really work. So I got one made, and as soon as I got that first one built, I thought, wow, this thing works awesome. So I sold In fact, I still have one. I've taken it apart, but it's still out there in my shop. But I sold that particular style of Sidewinder, which was a small benchtop machine. It had a cutting area of about 40 inches by 26 inches. But it was heavy, heavy gauge steel, pretty stout, and you could put a full size router on it. And it had the dual lead screws, which a lot of the hobby machines back in those days just had a single lead screw going down the middle. So when the router got off to one side or the other, it would tend to rack that gantry. Where if you got dual lead screws pushing, it doesn't do that. So, but I have, I guess they're still around. I sold about 100 of those Sidewinder CNC machines from about 2007 to 2010, I guess. And then, of course, the economy kind of took a dump, if you all recall, about that time. And I was still selling one or two here and there. And I thought, you know what? I think I'm just going to take a break from this and start enjoying my machine, because I never really had time to play with my machine. I was always busy building others for everybody else. So that's when, I guess that's kind of when the woodworking thing really started, because I needed to, now that I had a machine to sell, I needed to be able to show what that machine would do. So then I would, I was buying software and being able to demo the machine. And then I just started, I just really started liking woodworking. Is not the CNC part of it, but just regular woodworking. And so I slowly started adding, things to my shop. Like I'd buy a bandsaw, and then I had
what year are we looking at now when this is happening?
Well, the late 2000s, I guess, 2007 to 2010, around in there.
Okay.
But I added a scroll saw. I bought a cheap, really cheap table saw. I mean, one of them dangerous cheap table saws. And at the same time, I'm kind of, YouTube had been out a while, and I'm starting to watch YouTube videos and stuff. And, I started looking at the YouTube videos, and I'm kind of scratching my head going, I could probably do that. I mean, I'm going to be out here in my shop making stuff anyway, so why not just turn a camera on and do it, So I bought a really cheap camera. I still got that camera around here somewhere. It's one of those flip videos where you push the one button and that's it, But I started doing YouTube videos, and one of the popular video series that I've done is where I took that dangerous, scary, cheap table saw, and I put it into a metal frame and put a plywood top and made it where it was a big table saw, had a cabinet underneath it. And then I also made took like some 2x2 tubing, and since I'm a sheet metal guy, I had put in an order at work for some like a T-type bracket that would slide on that that 2x2 thing, and so in a big 2x4 piece of rectangle tubing for the fence. And so I did a video series, and I forget exactly what I called it, but I think it was how to turn a crummy table saw into a better table saw or whatever. And that I think it's like 2 or 3 videos, and that's probably one of my more popular videos from back in the day. I don't have that table saw anymore. I've since got a different one, but yeah, that's kind of how the woodworking thing got started. I guess technically the CNC thing probably came first, but it kind of got me into doing the other woodworking, because, like I said, I started adding different tools, and really a lot of my videos, if you go back and look, it's not so much that I'm buying tools. Like I said, I kind of made that crummy table saw into something that was safe to use. But then I also make a lot of stuff. Like I made my own router table with my own router lift. I've taken an old treadmill that one of my neighbors was going to throw away, and I took the parts off of it, and I made a drum sander.
Nice.
So got a big drum sander that's all. You don't lose any weight when you're using it, though. I figured that out. But it's got the control from that treadmill, and you just turn the dial so you can speed it up or slow it down. I've made disc sanders. You know, a lot of the stuff I just made just to see if I could. And of course, you know, like I said, when you watch YouTube and you see 5 guys make one 5 different ways, and then you go, I don't know, I think I'll take what I like best about this one and this one and this one and combine them and then kind of make one your own. So
were you back in that early time of YouTube and stuff? So you opened up a channel just about 2006?
Yeah, I've had a YouTube channel since 2007.
Okay, so I started in 2006, not with like any type of woodworking, but with music. I opened it up right away. And do you remember how different it was back then?
Oh yeah, it was a lot different. In fact, I think when I first started, and maybe it's still the same way, I don't know, but when I first started, all your videos couldn't be like over 10 minutes or something.
Yeah.
You know, so if you were shooting video and you got up to 10 minutes, it's like, well, now I got to make a part 2 because you couldn't, you know, you had to keep
the audio
it short.
was mono. Do you remember that the audio was just one track?
Yeah.
It was very, very basic. And so you got on there. So you got on there. Did you get on YouTube or on here? We're talking as if with the intent just to have fun, or did you think, well, I have this product and yeah, I'm letting it off, you know, putting it off so I can have fun and stuff and show what you can do with it, with the intent later to bring in the I mean, how was that whole process in your, you know, in your mind?
Well, it's funny because when I first started, I remember, you know, seeing, you know, guys like Mark Spagnuolo and like Stumpy Nubs and stuff like that. You know, I'm thinking, well, you know, gosh, you can actually make money at this, you know. So originally, you know, I think everybody kind of jumps into it a little naive, thinking, you know, they're going to get in YouTube, start making some money. Well, it didn't take long at all for reality to kick in and go, yeah, you can't make a whole lot of money at this unless you really put in the time. And I was still working full time, so I didn't have time to. And plus, I didn't want YouTube to be like a job, you know, or a second job. I just wanted it to be fun. I'm like, I'm out here in my shop making something anyway, so let me just stand the camera up on the tripod, hit the button, and if you go look at my earlier videos, well, of course, you can probably look at the one I put out last week and think the same thing, but they're all pretty unpolished. You know, I'm not one of those guys that drags, you know, studio lighting out in my shop and stuff. And in my early days, I used to get complaints all the time about the audio or this and that. And I'd say, look, dude, I'm a guy in a shop. Yeah. I'm just pointing the camera and kind of trying to show you what I'm doing, but I'm not in a studio. And I'm not going to be that way. I'm me. I'm just an old country bumpkin out here in my shop trying to stick a few boards together, you know.
Doc?
So I'm so slow to that mute button. I just, when I go for it, it's like so far away on my screen.
It's almost like you're in a, you know what it is? It's almost like you're in the Doc dimension where there's a tunnel.
Yep, it's like I had to like.
By the time you think to press the mute button to unmute, you're like traveling through the tunnel. I mean, I was in my mind, I'm like a video producer in my mind. I'm seeing the question Doc has.
I see it when you do. That's how long it takes me. I was like, okay, I have to be ready to jump in. Oh no, silence, and then I can't find my cursor.
It's
and
like
then it's like no. It's like jumping in front of a bullet in one of those movies. No.
It's almost like you're pressing the button on slow mo, and you're like, and in my mind, I'm thinking, all right, cut the Doc. All right, let's go back to Dave, JP,
yeah,
audience, let's go, boom, boom. I'm like, action, you know? And Doc is like, you know.
I think Doctoral might be right.
It's like Dark Side of the Moon.
Yeah, it's like, whoa, no. Okay, so anyway. Got some questions for Dave from the ladies and gentlemen of the chat. Let's start with Sokomo Woodwork has a question. What's the hardest project you think you've done so far?
Would that be a CNC project or a non-CNC project?
This project.
Probably the most, and this is going to be a CNC project. So all the, CNC haters, this isn't real woodworking. So disclaimer there. But probably the most complex project I've done is I made a Glastonbury chair using my CNC. And if you don't know what a Glastonbury chair is, you can Google it. It's a chair that was made by a monk way back, a few hundred years ago. And it's got a lot of very ornate carvings on it. And the reason it was challenging on the CNC is because not only did it have a lot of ornate carving on it, is like there's no plans. So I just had to look at pictures of this old chair that's a few hundred years old and draw up my own interpretation of those carvings. There's a lot of Latin sayings on the arms of the chair, and it's also on both sides of the arm. So there's a lot of parts that are have engraving on double sides. So that took quite a while to do. It probably took me more time to design it because I had to, like I said, I was going from pictures and having to draw everything myself. Then that part was probably harder than the actual cutting it out and assembling it.
Very cool. Very cool. All right. Next question is going to be from Daniel Haryu. What's the next big thing for small hobbyist CNC? Is there a new tech or anything that you think is up and coming?
Well, thanks, Daniel, for that question. That's a really good question because, CNC has come, especially hobby CNC, has come a very long way since my day when I first started. A lot of the home built CNCs were really rickety machines, and they're putting a Bosch compact router or something like that on it. Whereas now, you can put, like on mine, my Gatton CNC, I have a 2.2 kilowatt water cooled spindle. There's lasers now that you can put on the thing. The price of all of that stuff has come way down. Eloy left us, I guess.
Yeah, he does. He saw something shiny and wandered off. Don't worry about that.
Okay.
He's
welcome to I was just thinking, well, he left the screen stuck on you, Doc, and then I thought, well, wait a minute.
That's all right.
Welcome to episode 4 of The Maker's Mate.
Yep. Yeah, episode 4 of The Maker's Mate. I am your co-host, Doc. Finally, it's our time to shine.
Yeah. I don't know where Eloy is, so
don't worry about it. It's not even.
Let's go right from the start. So, what's your Batman story? Where did it all begin for Mr. Gatton?
Oh, we don't want to cover all that again, do we?
No, I just wanted to off the cuff have a conversation with you. I've seen your videos. I've even seen some of the CNC assembly videos, and you're definitely, not knowing what your background was, you can tell right away you had a mechanical background. Just by the way you would put things together and the way you approached. I watched the router table. I think I watched the router table build. I watched a couple of builds, and you could definitely tell. I can at least when someone is like a pure woodworker or someone is a mechanical woodworker is what I call it. My grandfather was a mechanical woodworker. Everything was, but so I can see that. I could definitely tell that you had that background about you.
And that's kind of one thing that getting back to my start with CNC, when I started selling them, that's kind of what really made things take off for me, is because I'm a mechanical guy. I've worked on cars and different things, but I'm not into electronics. I don't understand. My dad was a ham and he knew electronics inside and out, and somehow that gene just passed me. You know, I don't get it. So when I started building these CNCs, I had to search around and find an electronics package with stepper motors and the drivers and all that was kind of plug and play, or at least easy enough for this old country bumpkin to put together. And fortunately, I found a company that made a thing that was kind of color-coded wires. You plug this one into this one and flip it on, and you go. And that's really what kind of made my CNC stuff take off, is because since I'd done the research and found that, then I could say, you know, hey, you guys think, you know, it's too hard to build a CNC. It's not. You know, if you got, you know, which end of a screwdriver to hold, you can put one together, and the electronics isn't a problem anymore, because you can buy these kits that are already plug and play.
When you go ahead.
No, go on, mate.
All right, when you released one of the iteration of your machines, how many times have you put it together at that point? Like when you started selling plans for what your, you know, present type is, how long did it take before, or how many times did you have to put it together before you're sure I have all the parts? My hardware package is solid. Because I looked at the parts list and it was like, wow, that is a lot of technical, you know, stuff right there. I just wondered how long it take someone to put that together.
Here's the funny thing, Doc. Since I model everything in 3D, you know, you build the whole assembly with your 3D models. You model each part, you put it all together, you put screws, washers, nuts, all that stuff is in there. So when you do that in 3D, and like I said, I've been drawing in 3D for a long time, doing sheet metal stuff. So when you've done it as long as I have, I mean, I've sold the plans before I ever even built the one myself.